Yo, party people and all our fans at Internet Land, I'm David Estacado.
And I'm Rob the Movie Guy.
And today we got something really special for you guys today. It's actually our first for Rob and I for here at NRW. We have a special request from actually somebody we both know. I wouldn't necessarily call them a fan, though, would you, Rob?
No, my brother Juan, who requested this review for us to check out the film The Fly, which is the 1986 remake / retelling, or whatever else you may want to call it. It's true. He's not a fan, but he does support what we do. But he was requesting for us to check out this film and do a review on that because he'd be interested to hear our thoughts as we both get into this film. So, Juan, this is going to be for you. So before we get into our thoughts, let's go and roll that trailer real quick.
Roll it.
I think you're making a mistake. I think you really want to talk to me.
Sorry, I have 3 other interviews to do before this party's over.
Yeah, but they're not working on something that'll change the world as we know it.
They say they are.
Yeah, but they're lying.
There is a limit, even to the imagination.
Human teleportation, molecular decimation, breakdown, and reformation is inherently purging.
Where our greatest creations meet our deepest fears.
Something went wrong, Seth. When you went through, something went wrong.
You are about to go beyond that limit.
Those weird hairs that were growing out of your back, I had them analyzed. But they were definitely not human.
If you saw how scared and angry and desperate he...
I'm sure Typhoid Mary was a very nice person, too, when you saw her socially.
No!
You're afraid to be destroyed and recreated, aren't you?
You're changing, Seth. Everything about you is changing.
Oh, no. What's happening to me? Am I dying?
I want to know what's going on.
What does the disease want?
Wants to turn me into something else.
Oh, no.
A fly got into the transmitter pod with me that first time when I was alone.
Don't go back to it. Could be contagious.
I'm afraid!
Don't be afraid.
No. Be afraid. Be very afraid.
Help me. Please, help me.
And there you have it, the trailer for The Fly. I can see why he recommended it. This is something that both we have talked about before that we have seen as we were younger.
Yeah.
And it has a bit of a cult following, so to speak. It being a pretty much a pretty well-known horror film and it still holds up today. And I really would agree with him on the fact that saying it is a pretty good, well-done film. Oh, it has a lot of accolades. It's won many awards. And has gone through several re-rates before it got to the movie that we saw today, or recently.
Right. Well, so my brother, when he recommended the movie, it was not a film that ever crossed my mind for us to review. Not for any reasons, just, I had ideas for other films, and my brother had mentioned a few other things as well, too. But this was the one that he said, I want you to do this one, and I'll watch the video. Because like I said before, my brother is not a fan, and he's not really a movie guy. So the fact that he recommended for us to check this out, I was like, okay, we'll look into the matter. And I ended up buying the Shout Factory Blu-ray pack. And you're right, the film definitely holds up well. But I know you wanted to get into about some things before the film, because even as a fan, I am a fan, but I'm not one of those hardcore fanatics that loves the films and holds it in such a high stature, which it is a good film. I'm not saying it doesn't deserve it. It certainly is well deserving of that, but you seem to be more into the history than I am. I know little things about it here and there, but why don't you go and share some of those things that you want to get into? Yeah, because we did
talk about, you said you looked at a couple of the special features of the DVD that went through a little bit of the
Blu-ray.
history.
The Blu-ray.
Blu-ray. We did talk a little bit about it. Let's get a little bit into the plot. It is, if you haven't seen the movie, you're doing yourself a disservice. Go see it. Really, you should watch it. It's one of those classic 80s horror movies that still holds up. And it's mostly because of the creature effects and the makeup effect used throughout the film that still really holds up very well. Considering that it has won an award. It did win an Academy Award for Best Makeup.
Which
And
is the only film that Cronenberg's ever done that has won an Academy Award.
Yeah.
So it's like it's one of those. He's like the Stanley Kubrick in some ways, where he's only won one Oscar for a film he's ever done, and it's always for special effects. So it goes to show you that these guys' work don't go unnoticed. But it's odd that these guys who are well established and very well known directors don't get the other adulations that would come with that. Yeah, so which is kind of odd. But I think it's cool that he at least won an Oscar, but although not for him directly, which is odd.
So Chris Wallace did the makeup effects, especially on the special effects, and the makeup artist was Stephen Dupuis, who did most of the creature effects for like the transformation type of stuff. They did like 7 stages of that transformation as the main character was kind of being transformed into this fly. So that's kind of the story. This is about his scientist who's working on this teleportation experiment, and out of one night of a drunken stupor, he decides so all the other tests went through. I'm going to go through it myself. Unbeknownst to him, a fly gets stuck in there with him, and he slowly turns into this human fly monster, and his deterioration into that process. So it's your basic story. It is based on a short story by George Legland. Was actually, I think we did talk about this short story actually appeared in Playboy.
Yeah.
Oddly enough, but it was also loosely based upon the original Fly movie. That came out around
1958.
1958.
Yeah, because the short story was written in 57.
57. So speaking of awards, we both talked about how it did win an Academy Award for Best Makeup, but not for Best Director. We both, and in my opinion, Jeff Goldblum should have won Best Actor for his performance in this film, especially through all that makeup and everything he had to endure during the makeup, and still be able to have that presence and that charm, and still be able to kind of show the human qualities of Brendel as he was transforming. I think was a testament to his act. I think he did a fantastic job. I still think that he was kind of snubbed there for that, but that's just my opinion.
I don't think I felt that way. I think his performance with no doubt was good. He's really a good actor in this movie. There's no doubt about that. But I wouldn't go as far as saying that he probably does. He would deserve a nomination for Best Actor in the Academy Awards. I saw the film again. I remember when you said that prior to us getting into this here, and I was watching the film. I was like, yeah, I can see his performance being solid, but not to the point where like this guy deserves an Oscar nomination for that role. But I think for me, where I agree, where he definitely does a good job is where he's transforming into this fly and going through all those different stages, and then you can see where his mind's going at that time. So it definitely, I think in that regard, that's where he really does a good job, because in the beginning it's just Jeff Goldblum being Jeff Goldblum playing the piano and being charming. I was like, oh, that's nothing hard. It's not hard for him to pull off, But he definitely did a good job in going through those different stages of this transformation. But then his mind changes along the way, where he's becoming more obsessed about certain little details of this whole transformation, and obviously when he turns into the full blown fly, that's where Jeff Goldblum's no longer there anymore, relying solely on the mechanics that's involved to showcase a lot of these character moments for that fly as the character. And that's where I think it shines the most. But for Jeff Goldblum's best acting ability, I don't know. I probably have to do some more rewatching, I should say, to see if I agree with that. But I wouldn't be against it, but it's not something that I thought, yeah, he deserves it. That's just my thought on the matter there. But you obviously have other opinions about that too. But something else you also wanted to bring up as well, that you really thought highly of the film outside of Jeff Goldblum and obviously the special effects. But I'm not sure if we ever talked about this, and I don't remember if you had mentioned it once before. The music in the movie,
yeah,
I thought the music was solid, despite the fact it had this heavy. In a weird way, I didn't think of Inception, but for some reason I thought if Hans Zimmer saw this movie as back in the 80s, And if he got inspiration from the beats of that orchestra in that film, I can see where he would have gotten inspiration from that, because it definitely has somewhat of a similar vibe to that, where you had that big one, but not as annoying as it is now. Because in the beginning, when Hans did that theme, it worked, but then after a while, started becoming redundant. But that theme right there certainly had a very impactful moments, especially for some of the more emotional scenes in the film. But I think he may have talked about me once, if I'm not mistaken, unless I'm wrong. But I thought you brought that
once. I think we did talk it briefly. Like they did really. The score was really well done.
Yeah.
Like the soundtrack in itself was really good, and that was actually funny that you mentioned that. Like Howard Shore was the one who did it, and it was done mostly by the London Philharmonic Orchestra. Actually, did the entire score for this movie.
I saw the film too, and I didn't even pay attention who scored it. Well, here's the thing about
all
this
the
movie.
notes, man. It's all.
No, I know, but it's just that when I saw the movie, I knew certain things about the film, but for some reason, as much as I enjoyed the movie, I only focused on the film itself. I didn't really pay too much attention to the other details about the movie outside of David Cronenberg, Gina Davis, of course, and Jeff Goldblum. But as far as like who these special effects people were, I don't know why I was never really invested to look into that, because even when you briefly mentioned it too, I was trying to watch the special features earlier, and I was like 15 minutes into the Blu-ray special about the beginning stages of the film, and I was bored. And not to say that that part of the document was so boring. It's just, I don't know. I did not get connected to that process of what it took to make that film. Maybe for me, it was probably because it looked too EPK-ish, Electronic Express kit type of thing. And I was like, oh, I hate that. Because, so then I went to the director and he came up to me. He said this, it has a little like, it all worked out too well in that situation. So something about that seemed a little too disconnected for me. And maybe I'm just being too harsh, probably. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Maybe. But I wasn't in a good mood, though. So it wasn't like as if they're like, fuck this asshole for being so successful. It wasn't that.
Well, funny that you mentioned it, because like it did go through several rewrites. Like the original draft is a little bit different than what we get, because Cronenberg kind of took the original draft of the movie, which was originally written by let's see, my notes here, by Charles Pogue. So he took some parts from his original draft and kind of tweaked it. He even like pushed for like, hey, I'm not gonna, if you don't give him credit, I'm not gonna want credit for it, because if it weren't for his draft, you wouldn't have the movie you have.
Oh yeah, I remember hearing
most of my stuff is based off his original draft, where it was like a couple. There were actually they kind of reworked some characters. Like there was like technically like 4 or 5 characters in the original draft, and he kind of trimmed it down to like the 3, because he merged one of the 2 characters to be the ex-boyfriend and the boss for the publishing company that she was working with. So like they kind of stick to the story that he was transforming into the Fly and loses body parts and all the nasty stuff. They even had the like the whole weird bad dream that was kind of the ending. We'll get into that later on. But Cronenberg's draft kind of revised a little bit. It's still stuck with the basic plot of the transporter and everything, the teleporter and all that, but it kind of more about the relationship between Seth Brundle and the reporter, played by Gina Davis. He kind of stuck him around that his kind of going crazy and the personality changes during the early part of the transformation. How when he started deteriorating, the relationship started deteriorating, and then more of the grotesque transformation, as Cronenberg is usually known for. And he's also like kind of like the more twisted and rewrites, and being the transformation being this horrible, very I guess metaphorical change, being about disease and being more about this horrific. It's not only affecting the person who's dealing with it, but everybody else around him. So he really put an emphasis on that. He still used the nasty bug baby.
Do you think there's did you pick up on a social commentary for that film about how it touches upon certain things about diseases or whatever else? Is that what you picked up on the movie?
Yeah, I actually picked up after rewatching it a couple times. At first, we originally both saw this movie as we were kids.
Yeah.
My first experience, I don't know if it's the same as yours. I caught it on cable television first.
Yeah.
And then later on, of course, when the big, companies would kind of do like, hey, here's a free month or a free month or two of whatever, HBO, Cinemax, whatever. Then I'll catch the whole full movie. I think it wasn't until like I was in middle school I was actually able to see the complete movie in one run. Because originally I just saw bits and pieces. But at the time I was obsessed with it because I was a big Jeff Goldblum fan because of Jurassic Park and some other movies as he was in. So it left an impression, especially with the gore and the practical effects and stuff like that. I was a huge kid. I was like the opposite of you. I loved.
You were a huge kid.
A huge movie kid. Sorry, as when I was younger. So that's all I usually was to do was like watch movies, play video games, whatever. But I was huge into like practical effects. I always like loved the behind the scenes stuff of how they did that, and the cinema tricks that you would use, and just the makeup artists and stuff like that. I love that kind of stuff, especially creature effect stuff. My favorite stuff to get into. So yeah, that kind of helped with my love of horror and creature effects stuff too.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. I think you mentioned before that you had watched it on TV, as did I, and I also came across it eventually through HBO or somewhere. I can't remember which channel it was, but that's where I'm sure, like yourself, because you and I have discussed about this before, where I really noticed the side, well, how brutal the transformation process was for him, especially when he turns into the Fly at the very end, and all the other stuff that comes along the way, him puking on shit and sticking on stuff and things coming out of him and whatever else. Even like the little subtle things where that wonderful arm wrestling scene, which is I think the one that most people refer to, where he's arm wrestling a man just to win over a woman. And then when he's arm wrestling the guy, he obviously is very strong and dominant over the man. But when he squeezes that guy's hand, all the white stuff starts to come out from his hand. And I remember that little detail that is so gross. I can't imagine how the guy's hand. I mean, obviously he broke his hand, his wrist, of course. But
yeah,
just feeling that and seeing that, like those little subtle things for me really help push the gross factor of this man's transformation. Which even in such a mundane like holding someone's hand, even in a competitive form of like grabbing hands, it still shows how gross that whole process. Hands. So yeah, and like that's why I do like the film. I wouldn't go as far as saying as I love the film, but I think it's a good movie. You mentioned before that this is more like a horror film, and we had this discussion.
I would say body horror film.
Well, despite that,
go through the transformation. You're figuring out what the hell is going on with him as he's doing it.
Right.
And you're right. There's some contrast, but go on, because I want to touch upon that too.
Well, I don't look at the film as a horror movie because to me it doesn't stream horror. I know it is considered a horror film, but even after discussing it with you on several occasions, that I know I said before, yeah, I can see it as a horror film, but then the more I think about it, I don't view it as a horror film at all. In fact, I do look at it more as a character piece, which I've told you about that in the past on many occasions. But as a horror movie, the only thing horrific about the film is just the transformation process, because even when the character of Seth Brundle, played by Goldblum, goes through those transformation, it's not really he's not. I wouldn't look at him as a monster creature. It's not like Frankenstein or it's not like the werewolf. Because people still find him appealing despite the change, and obviously when the changes are really starting coming really heavily into his everyday look, to the point where he starts hiding from people. So now the horror is not exposed to everybody else except those who really know him. When in this case it'd be Gina Davis's character. I think her name is Veronica, right?
Veronica, yeah.
Yeah. So she's really the only person that sees him in that transformation from pretty much from start to finish. And you see it from that perspective. There is no element of horror where he's attacking other people, or that there's some sort of supernatural vibe to it that gives that horror, that sense of like of this glooming darkness feel to it. It's nothing. It's none of that at all, in my opinion. It definitely has a kind of like a rusty feel to it, given especially where he lives, which I think is a great looking apartment, despite the fact it looks like a factory. So I always found that, how can a man afford to live in a place like this? It's
all the funding. It's all the funding
he was
getting. Despite paying off the rent.
but the point is that I'm getting at is I don't see that as a horror film because it just doesn't scream or doesn't have the similar beats as a horror film, in my
Now, the
opinion. I don't
reason
see
why
that
you're
at all.
saying that, I think the reason why you feel that way is the fact that they didn't focus on the horror until later on in the film, and that's why I think works so well for this film,
Mhm.
because it's more about this relationship between Veronica and Seth, and you start to care for him. Like you see, he's just charismatic, just such a charismatic guy and quirky and nerdy. And she falls in love for that, you know. And us as the audience, kind of like, hey, this is Jeff Goldblum at his best, being this quirky, charming guy. You kind of fall in love with him too. And so, you know, he starts transforming. He starts becoming a jerk, and you see that
Yeah.
something's wrong. You know,
It's
we
starting to
clearly
get to his
see,
head. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, you know, we clearly as the audience see what ends up happening. He doesn't. So there's that there. So we know there's something coming. We don't know what, and it's this buildup of, oh, he's slowly deteriorating and changing, and so he's no longer able to speak and to transform into this hideous monster. Um, which, you know, going back, I like how they took their time to slowly show those stages of deterioration, not just physically but mentally, up to like the very final moments. He's unable to speak. He finally loses that bit of humanity, making the human coherent thought, which I think actually adds to that final moment at the end, where like it's mostly at this point the bug brain, and he's trying to merge with Veronica at the end with the pods and everything.
Mhm.
And then the very final moments, you get that brief humanity at the end, where like there's the way he's has no way to live, so
Yeah.
he asks for a way out.
That was actually a pretty touching scene, I think. Despite everything he had gone through, but so are you saying that with the transformation reveal at the end, that's where the horror elements kicks in for you, or is that why you
No,
consider it as a horror film?
no, you see the horror. It's more of a body horror at the very beginning stages of transformation.
Right.
Um, but it gets more increasingly like it starts amping up the worse it gets. Like
Right.
for us and like for me, it was that there's something wrong with me and I don't know what it is. And then he like literally he it's like not so well like the last 20-30 minutes of the film you start seeing those changes because it takes a bit to get up to that point. It's not till like I want to say like midway halfway through the film you see the teleportation and everything. Is not till the later parts of the film like you actually see the actual transformation take place. So they kind of build up to that, but the
Right.
way they build up to it is fantastic. They kind of like show the little hairs on his back, and then it just starts deteriorating. I don't think like the first body parts off just falls off until like near almost 30 minutes. About 30 minutes into the film, his tooth falls out, and then his nails start falling out, and then
Yeah.
he squishes his finger goo. Like,
Yeah.
like it just gets worse from there, and that's kind of part of it. Like, and then we spoke about it earlier that Cronenberg's rewrite of the film was kind of to show that metaphor for like the aging process and disease, and some people picked up on the AIDS pandemic at the time as well, as it's changing you, destroying you from the inside. Like he starts losing his hair, his teeth, his skin becomes more like cancerous looking and gross. Like that's where the horror for me lies in. It's just kind of like you see this slow progression as he deteriorates and how it's affecting him and her. Especially the one scene when he calls her like, "Hey, I need to see you. I'm scared. Help."
Yeah.
She tries to help him. She feels for him, and you
Yeah.
feel that connection. That even though he's turning into this grotesque monster in a way, there's probably no cure for him. She still loves and cares for him.
Yeah. Well, I see where you're coming from with that, but despite all that, I still don't see that as a horror film. It's weird because when I was watching the film, I was trying to get some of those horror beats, and maybe because Cronenberg does a good job in not focusing on the horror, because if you have those horror aesthetics for a film like this, maybe it can probably take away for some of the validity of the characters' relationships and the emotional beats. Not to say that you can't do that with a story like that. We've seen that plenty of times where horror films have done very good jobs and having you connect with the characters and you being a part of that journey with them. And then at the end, whatever they go through, whether they succeed or not, you still have some sort of connection with them and you walk away, feeling a part of the journey with those characters. For this film, maybe for me, because I think this is one of the very few films that I really liked, but I'm watching it as an outsider perspective. I'm not really I'm invested in the characters because I did feel for Goldblum's character at the end when he begs Veronica to
mercy?
kill him.
Yeah.
Right, pretty much. But I always feel like I watch this movie from the outside in because I don't look at it as a film that talks about social commentary things, especially with the AIDS pandemic at that time when the film had come out and disease, whatever. I don't look at it like that film as that at all. I simply look at it as a story for what it is. And there's slight mentions of the whole thing about Goldblum talking about that sort of stuff, but it was kind of like sprinkled in there, but it was never really part of the actual story.
One things I really appreciate about the movie and about this film is like the way he wrote the movie, the way he did the movie. It's not so on the nose that you're like, oh, you pick up on it.
Right.
It's something like after a couple rewatches, you slowly do pick up on that.
Well, that's the thing. Even after a few rewatches before we started recording, I still don't get that vibe from it. I'm still looking at it from the outside in. I'm not feeling as if though I'm a part of the journey. It's more like it's literally me. I kind of liken it to if someone that I knew was going through something, maybe not to that exact situation, but something along those lines. And I'm just looking from the outside, like, oh, they did that. Holy shit! Well, hope that guy turns out to be, gets better soon. That's kind of how I look at it when I watch this movie. Like, I know what the events are going to turn out to be, but that's how I feel like when I watch this movie. So I don't have the connection to it. Whereas I watch, let's say, like The Extras, which is a film I absolutely love. I think it's a great movie, especially the re-edited version, which I think is fantastic. There, I have a connection with that movie. Films like The Exorcism of Emily Rose, I feel I'm a part of that journey. I feel like I'm invested in that. This movie, I don't have that connection with it like that. I like the film. I think it's a great movie, but I don't. It's like I said before. It's like I know the guy. I know who he is. I don't know what he's going through. But yeah, just stay over there. That's how I feel about the story.
All right. So about final thoughts. What are your actual final thoughts for this film? Like, it's a critically acclaimed film. It holds a high approval rating. It's up there for a bunch of horror fans. I mean, you kind of gave me some of your opinion now. Is it warranted the recognition that it's getting, or it has?
I think so.
Do you think it's overrated? Do you think it's underrated? Final thoughts.
Well, I think the only thing that and I'm just talking about from your perspective there, is when you said that Goldblum deserves an Oscar nomination, he was robbed. I think that's not true. That's just how I don't think it's a performance that's warranted of that sort of recognition. I'm not saying that if he got it and he won it, it wasn't deserved. I just think I think there might have been a better candidate for the position of them winning that award. The fact that he got overlooked, it speaks to me as if that they were focusing more on the other aspects of the film that they hadn't seen before up to that point, and that was the special effects, because it was used effectively in that story. The characters were good, but people are always going to remember the most about the gross factor, and that's what I got out of the film the most. Because when I walked away from the film, yes, the characters are good, but the special effects is what really is the main show, because that's what the people want to see. And this is an example of that as long as you tell a good, compelling story, the gross factor is just the icing on the cake. And that's what this film was to me. So this, for me, is an example of that. If you do everything right and you do it with the right people and having the right ideas and putting all those ideas put together, you can come out with a great project. And this is an example of that. Is it well deserved of his adulations and and all the high praise? Yes, I think it is. I think it's really well deserved of that. I would recommend it. I wouldn't recommend it to everybody, because I know there's gonna be some people who watch and they'll just walk away. Just the first sight of some guy losing his nails and all of a sudden turns into a grotesque five, puking on donuts, hands and feet and whatever else. I don't think it's gonna be for a film for most people to want to watch and sit through like that, because it definitely has that gross element to it that may not appeal to the mass audience, in my opinion. But I think there is definitely still audience out there for that. As far as for a new generation, I'm sure they'll watch this film today and be like, "Oh, it's not as bad." But when we were kids, we're like, "Holy shit, this is shocking." So I still hold that in that regard, because I saw it as a child and I grew up with it and it stuck with me. Mm-hmm. But for those reasons alone. But yeah, that's kind of my long rant.
That's a whole other conversation we could have. Yeah, like about just that one about that year of like, I think horror movies should have been. I think it's not the first one. I think American Werewolf in London was also one of the first movies that won awards for its effect.
Yeah, we had
effects.
discussed about it before in our previous review. Yeah, we definitely brought that up. That it was a film
I
that was
kind of feel
it was
like
the reason
horror
why
movies.
it created for that category because of that
Yeah,
movie, and it won, and it was
yeah,
deserved, especially at that time.
yeah.
Yeah, but your thoughts on it though?
For me, I love the film. It's one of my favorite movies up there when it comes to horrors. I want to say it's my favorite of all time. But there's a reason why I went and rewatched this in middle school, as I was going through my old horror VHS tapes and movies, just to kind of rewatch the whole thing. And as I'm rewatching it again recently, it still holds up. The practical effects still hold up. Yes, it's very
For the most
80s,
part, it does. Yeah.
yeah, it's very 80s and it's very kind of almost cheesy, but I think it adds to that quality. At some points, especially some of the deleted scenes when it comes to like him trying to find a cure and merging this monkey and this cat together and him being attacked by it, and some of the later scenes. For me, yes, one of the main things that really stands out for this film is the gross out factor, but it wasn't the emphasis for the movie. It was the story and the tragedy that he was going through, that there's no cure for what he was going through. He's pretty much was trying to beat that, or in a way somehow find some good out of the situation, even though it was mad scientist good at the end. It was like, oh fuck it, we'll just merge together and we'll be happy. He still was trying to find a way out. And for me, the main things that really stuck out was, I believe that we spoke about this before, like we know as we're going through our notes here, we forgot to mention, was the two things that we remember most from this movie was, how does Brundlefly eat? Well, Brundlefly doesn't have any teeth, so him, puking on the donuts, to eat the donuts was really gross. And then the dream sequence of because Veronica finds out that she's pregnant with Seth's baby, and she doesn't know if it was before or after the experiment. So she's afraid. She's going through this crisis of what she wants to do, and she ends up having this nightmare sequence that was an original script. Towards the end is kind of a weird ending to a more of the middle of the film in the Cronenberg version, to kind of show like her horror that she was going through of there's something in me and I don't know what to do, and she gives birth to this bug baby, this bug monster. It was such a gross out moment.
It was a larva, because that's
Larva,
what flies, how they are born. Yeah, that was nasty. I still can't watch that scene. I always get really affected by that. I can't do birth, period. And I talked to you before, I think the other day. Yeah, it was it was the day before, I think. We were talking about that, and I can't handle births. I couldn't handle my son's birth when we were having him. It's something that just doesn't sit well with me. So any births, even when puppies are born, which you would think would be the cutest things, I find that nasty. So the whole birthing process for me in general, and I don't mean to to disregard how people feel about it, but for me personally, it's just not my cup of tea. It's not something I enjoyed that process. It makes me very, very sick to my stomach, literally. So when I saw that scene, I was like, man, if my wife gave birth to that, I'd be like, I would have just, I don't know what I would have done, but I would have been horrified seeing something like that. And let alone me not having the stomach just to see a regular birth. Seeing that shit come out would be fucking disgusting. I would probably pass out from that. But yeah, I agree that those effects that the film have when it came to those moments in the movie, they were very effective. They were done very, very well. You could tell when it wasn't Jeff Goldblum, puking in certain scenes. But anyways, yeah, I agree with you on those particular moments in the film. But before we close out, is there anything else you want to add on to this here too? Because I think there might be a thing or two we may have left out, because there's quite a few that we definitely had talked about and we wanted to get into, but I'm not sure if we covered all the bases here. So anything else you want to add on to that before we go?
Not that I know off the top of my head. Unless there's something that you want to get into before we go into one more final thing.
Once I already said about that. Once you mentioned about that maggot scene, I was like, nope, I'm good.
Well, there you have it. I still give it right now still 9 out of 10. High cheers. Probably one of Jeff Goldblum's best performances, if not his best. Same thing with Miss Gina Davis. Fantastic role as well. there were talks for some sequels. Cronenberg did promise Mel Brooks a sequel that he wanted to produce and give him, but Mel Brooks did his own sequels. There's even a comic book sequel that takes place. That is weird. Definitely check that out. So I definitely advise.
What's the name of that comic book? For anyone
Let's see. I think it's called like The Fly. I think it's like a sequel to the second film.
Oh, okay.
The Fly Outbreak is the name of that. 2015 IDW Publishing. Definitely check that out. And there's actually talks right now of Cronenberg possibly doing a remake. That's been in talks for quite some time. So definitely want to see where that goes. But yeah, I mean, there's just has become such an iconic film, not for the 80s remake, but the original too. It's become such a cultural icon movie. It's been in our pop culture for quite some time. It's been parodied over. It's been parodied on The Simpsons. It's been parodied on Rick and Morty. It's been it's become it's become such an iconic thing that it's part of the
pop culture lexicon,
horror, and just movies in general. And for a good reason, for a good high acclimated good reason, I give it high cheers. Definitely high cheers.
Cool. Yeah, I would give it a high cheers as well too. I think it's very well deserved of its praise. But yeah, those are our thoughts on the film. So let us know what you guys think in the film. If you guys have seen the film, give us your thoughts. Did you guys come across it like ourselves when we were children on TV, and then seeing the full version of the film and its uncut version on VHS, DVD, whatever the case may be? Let us know what you guys think in the comment section down below. And if you have not seen the film, as we mentioned before, check it out. We actually do think you may come to enjoy it. It is a little gross in the body horror side of it.
Understatement. Gross.
Well, but it definitely, if you make some comparisons now, we mentioned before that it does hold up well. We really do believe it still does do a good job in holding it up too.
Same thing with The Thing, which is another 80s horror film that the practical effects still hold up to this day.
Yeah.
Maybe a little wonky, but it still holds up.
Yeah, and I think this movie certainly deserves at least a watch from everybody. And however you want to formulate your opinion after the fact, obviously that'll be for you to decide. But we hope you come to enjoy the film as much as we did, even though I have my thoughts on the film and from different from what David has his thoughts on the film. But overall, we both enjoy the film a great deal, and it is a justified fun time for you to watch the film. And I think it's one of those movies you guys could watch with a group of friends, especially if you've never seen it before, to kind of get your guys' perspective and have everyone's thoughts and ideas and word vomits come out at that point. I think it's one of those films to watch as a group. But anyway, so make sure you've also subscribed to our channel as well too. And if you haven't done so already, hit that notification button as well, because we do have upcoming videos coming down the pipeline that we are really excited for you to check out as well. And also make sure you follow us on our social media accounts as well too. We have a Facebook and Instagram page at New Release Wednesdays, and on Twitter at the NRW. You can follow myself on my social media accounts. I have an Instagram page, Rob_Medina0585, and on Twitter, RobMedina0585, and on Facebook, simply just Rob the Movie Guy. And my good buddy over there, where can they follow you, good sir?
You can follow me on my Instagram or on my Twitter page on David Is Disaster, and then you can follow me on my personal Facebook page, David A. Estacado, where I post random memes, random pop culture stuff, and whatever I'm doing locally in the local indie scene down here in the Southern Virginia area. And you can also see me pop up any other random stuff that I'm getting into, promotional stuff. So definitely follow me on there, where Rob and I usually kind of share random stuff as well and kind of get into it pop culture wise. So if you like what we're doing here, definitely check out what we're doing. Check out our other videos. We have a bunch of other reviews that we've been doing. And if you love what Rob and I are doing, besides reviews, definitely check out what the rest of the crew is doing. We have our boy Kuya P with the Show Pal Show. We have the Nerds of Color, and we have a bunch of other of our friends actually doing streaming and every other reviews when it comes to movies, music, video games, and everything else pop culture here at the NRW.
All right, guys, and until next time, thank you very much for joining us here today, and we hope you guys enjoyed the video. And again, let us know what you guys think in the comment section down below. We'd be happy to read them, I meant to say, and respond back to you. And any requests you guys have out there, please let us know in the comment section down below, or reach us out to our social media accounts as well. But until next time, everybody, stay safe out there, and cheers.
Cheers. Hey, Rob. I can show you the world, shining, shimmering, splendid.